The galactic consensus had been clear for 3 centuries. Humans were dangerous, not in the overt way of the Krythax warrior clans or the cold calculation of the Veiled Synod. No, humans were dangerous because they cared too much, felt too deeply, and intervened where no rational species would dare. Aelin had heard the warnings during her orientation aboard the Celestial Meridian, the massive colony ship that housed over 40 different species. Keep your distance from the human sections, her supervisor had advised, mandibles clicking nervously. They're unpredictable. But Elin was a xenobiologist, and unpredictability fascinated her. Besides, someone had to monitor the environmental systems in Sector 7 human, and her species, the Valkorians, were considered non-threatening enough for the assignment. What the warnings hadn't mentioned was Raku. Elin first encountered the young predator in the maintenance tunnels beneath the residential quarters. The Valkorian had been running diagnostics on the atmospheric regulators when she heard it. A soft, broken sound that her translator couldn't quite process. Something between a whimper and a growl. She rounded the corner carefully, her 4 eyes adjusting to the dimmer lighting. There, crouched in the shadows between 2 massive coolant pipes, was a Vrexian cub. Raku couldn't have been more than 6 solar cycles old, barely past infancy for his species. His silver-black fur was matted, his triple-jointed limbs folded impossibly tight as he tried to make himself smaller. Valkorians weren't predators. They were agricultural specialists, harvesters, gentle by nature and design. Every instinct in Elin's biology screamed at her to back away from the young Vrexian. His species had evolved on a death world where everything hunted everything else. Even their children had retractable claws and teeth designed for tearing. But Raku wasn't attacking. He was crying. Elin kept her distance, crouching low to appear less threatening. "Small one," she said softly. "Are you injured?" The cub's 3 eyes snapped to her, pupils dilating with fear. He pressed something against his chest, a small object Elin couldn't quite see, and shook his head violently. "I won't hurt you," Elin continued, though she wondered if her words meant anything to a species that communicated as much through pheromones as language. "Are you lost?" Before Raku could respond, footsteps echoed through the tunnel, heavy, measured, distinctly human. Elin's head whipped around to see a figure approaching, tall, bipedal, with that unnerving, forward-facing predator gaze that marked humanity's evolutionary path. "Hey there," the human said, his voice lower and gentler than Elin expected. He wore the standard gray uniform of the ship's maintenance crew, name badge reading Chen. "Everything okay?" "I found a Vrexian cub," Elin explained, gesturing toward Raku. "He seems distressed, but I don't know why." Chen nodded slowly, then did something Elin found shocking. He sat down on the cold metal floor, cross-legged, making himself smaller and less threatening. "Hey, buddy," he said to Raku. "Rough day." The cub didn't respond, but his trembling lessened slightly. "I'm not going to come closer," Chen continued, his tone conversational. "But I noticed you're holding something. Did something break?" Raku's ears flattened against his skull, a sign of shame in Vrexian body language. Slowly, reluctantly, he extended his clawed hand. In it was a small mechanical creature, no bigger than Ellen's palm. It had been exquisitely crafted, with articulated joints and what looked like bioluminescent panels. But one of its legs was snapped, and its head hung at an unnatural angle. "A companion construct," Elin whispered. She knew of them, expensive, personalized toys given to young predators to help them learn empathy and gentle touch. For a Vrexian cub, breaking such a gift would be devastating. "Oh man," Chen said, genuine sympathy in his voice. "That's a beautiful piece of work. What happened?" Raku's translator finally kicked in, his young voice crackling through. I grabbed too hard, during sleep cycle. I didn't mean to. Father will be angry." "Did you tell your father?" Chen asked. The cub shook his head violently. "He'll think I'm defective, weak. Vrexian cubs are supposed to control their strength." Elin felt her heart's ache. Even among predator species, children were just children. Chen was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, that peculiar human expression that showed teeth but somehow conveyed warmth. Can I see it? I might be able to help. Raku hesitated, instinct warring with hope. Finally, he crept forward, just close enough to place the broken toy in Chen's outstretched hand before scurrying back to his corner. Chen examined the construct with careful precision, turning it over in his hands. The good news is, this is fixable. The leg joint just needs realignment, and the head servo can be reset. Give me, maybe 20 minutes? He didn't wait for permission. From his tool belt, Chen produced a compact repair kit, standard issue for maintenance crews. But what Elin watched wasn't standard at all. The human worked with a delicacy that defied his species' reputation. His large hands, built for grasping and manipulating, moved with microscopic precision. He murmured to himself as he worked, occasionally glancing up at Raku with reassuring smiles. My daughter had something like this, Chen said conversationally as he worked. She was about your age. Accidentally dropped it in the bathtub, cried for hours, but we fixed it together. And you know what? She was extra careful with it after that. Sometimes breaking something teaches us how precious it really is. Elin watched the cub's body language shift. The tension bled from his shoulders. His ears lifted slightly. 18 minutes later, Chen activated the construct. Its bioluminescent panels flickered to life, cycling through soft blues and purples. The creature stood on all its legs, shook itself, and chirped, a sound of recognition programmed to comfort its owner. Chen stood slowly, walked halfway to Raku, and gently set the toy on the ground. There you go, buddy. Good as new. Maybe even a little stronger. I reinforced those joints. Raku crept forward, hesitant. He touched the construct with one claw, then scooped it up, holding it close. His three eyes were wide, shimmering with what Elin recognized as tears. Thank you, the cub whispered. Why would you? For me. Chen shrugged, that casual human gesture that conveyed both humility and confidence. Because you needed help. That's reason enough. Later, Wi-Fi, after Raku had scurried back to his family's quarters, Elin stood with Chen in the corridor. Your species is strange, she said finally. You saw a predator's child, a member of a species that could, in adulthood, easily harm you. And your first instinct was to help. Chen chuckled. Is that really so strange? Yes, Elin said firmly. Most species would have calculated risk, assessed genetic compatibility, determined social obligation. You just saw someone who needed help. Well, Chen said, shouldering his tool bag, that's the thing about humans. We're really good at seeing people instead of categories. Sometimes it gets us in trouble, but sometimes... He glanced back toward where Raku had disappeared. Sometimes it makes all the difference. As Elin filed her report that evening, she added a personal note to the file. Observation, human intervention capacity appears rooted not in calculation, but in empathy. Further study recommended. Current assessment, potentially dangerous to conventional diplomatic frameworks. Recommend continued monitoring. Also recommend continued cooperation. She paused, then added one final line. The predator cub smiled. Perhaps that is worth the risk.